longevity lifestyle designers. This is Gavin here with secretsoflongevity.com. I am doing a response video to a recent comment on a recent video. The video is approximately from 2 weeks ago, actually an entire month ago at this point. And it was titled, "Why Soylent is Unhealthy in the Long Term." You may have remembered it. And the comment was just from 2 days ago, and it was a very in-depth comment. So I figured, why not spend the time to go over it in a video so that you guys can see my process for taking in criticism. This is mostly constructive criticism, but there is a fair amount of emotional driven sophistry mixed in with the wonderful points that AnimePandah has brought up. So I have my standards for what I actually end up responding to. If something is very barren in terms of personal attack, so any type of logical fallacy, I usually just let it go and will respond depending on how crucial it is, or I'll refer to a video that already answers the question or criticism. But the more the fallacies creep in, the more the hostility and adjective-laden language comes in, then I start to become more likely to either block or delete the comment or the person, or just point out their fallacies and ask them to remove those, etc. But for the purpose of the video, obviously, I'm going to overlook those and we'll point them out as I come through the text. And as I go through this, I'll be making references, and you can check out the links below for those numbers to get what it is I'm talking about. The first link below is going to be the video that this comment was posted on, and that was just, like I said, from a month ago, a few videos back, and I'll be reading segments of his text or her text and then adding my comments. So right off the bat, they've done very well in using timestamps, although they were a little off. I think, I don't know why that is, but the things that they were addressing were actually usually about 10 seconds earlier. But at 2:30, I think you are making a stereotype of tech people, categorizing them as people that don't eat well. From anecdote, I know plenty spend the time to cook balanced meals and exercise. So this really isn't a criticism of anything I brought up, in that I was clearly making a stereotype. I wasn't claiming it to be anything but that. And in response, they've got their own anecdote. So a stereotype, which is based on my own anecdotal impressions from media and people I know, versus someone else's anecdotal impressions. It was simply my explanation for why I think Soylent is such an attractive thing for people. And this is something that's actually talked about by the creator, by these people, that, you know, these people in tech startups and in their business, they're working literally from waking up to going to bed, and they want to have the ease and convenience of consuming something that takes barely any time to prepare. That's just what is being advertised that is good for, and that's what I'm mentioning in the video, so that doesn't really actually address any points. And then the majority of your criticisms all come at the 15-minute mark and later, or 15 and a half and later. So the first 15 minutes of the video, it seems that you have absolutely no response to. And there was a lot of points I made in that. You can watch the video yourselves, those who are viewing this, to see everything I brought up. But by the end of this series of comments they made, they were making these conclusions about everything I said being wrong, and all these wrong impressions from my take on these things. Yet you didn't even counter the majority of the stuff that was in the video. Okay, so at 15:55, whoa, this entire segment is practically a fear tactic to scare people out of taking calcium. It clearly illustrates that you have no understanding of pathogenesis in arthritis, cancer, or Alzheimer's. I will give you macular degeneration, since no one really knows how it develops, but you have no scientific backing for this at all. And what the hell? Needs a carbon molecule to be bioavailable? All known calcium supplements, calcium formate, calcium citrate, calcium carbonate, all have carbon atoms in the compound. If you have to deny commonly well-known established scientific research, even if it's groundbreaking research around calcium-forming organisms, I mean, I don't know why you wouldn't look that up just to prevent yourself from looking foolish, because, you know, these are real things. The only issues that is in debate right now in the research and by biologists that are looking into this problem that's at the center of virtually every disease, every chronic disease. They only don't understand yet whether it's actually living or not. It's a bacteria the size of a virus, and they can't tell for sure whether it is something that's just mechanically doing what it does, like a virus, or if it's actually something that is living. It appears to be something that's living, which is very strange and is quite groundbreaking. It's fairly recent research, but places like the Mayo Clinic are researching this. And just like a barnacle on a ship collects inorganic calcium from its surrounding environment and produces a shell around itself, this is the same procedure. It's a very tiny virus-sized bacteria, possibly, that creates a shell around itself, and over the years, many decades, they build up and cause problems. And this is the foundation to arthritis and all these things that have calcium forming components to them. They know that at the center of virtually all cancers, there's bits of calcium. They know at the center of gallstones, there's usually calcium. Same with kidney stones. So link number 2 below is the Wikipedia article on nanobacterium. I don't know why you wouldn't have just looked this up. Seriously, it doesn't look good on your part. And link number 3 below is a video I've done in the past talking about its connection with long-term health. There's strategies you can implement through supplementation and just avoiding certain things to limit the growth of this in your lifetime. And it's a strategy a lot of people need to take into consideration and make sure it's something they're vaguely aware of in the background throughout their entire life, because it is something that contributes to virtually everything. In cautioning people against taking something that is harmful is not a fear tactic. So that is a fallacious argument. That's just adding an adjective to try and sound like you're making a point. You're trying to say, I'm using fear tactics. Well, I know what I'm doing, you're referencing that, but you're just claiming that's what it is. But you have to prove that it's not true. And you also have to prove that I'm intentionally doing it, even though I would know it's untrue. But I both know it's true, and it is true, unless you can prove that this has recently been debunked or proven not to exist. Then I'm cautioning people about this. It's a thing that we're warning people about to help them accommodate and change their lifestyle to live healthier lives. So it's really apparent you don't understand the basic terms organic and inorganic as it applies to chemistry and compounds, molecules. You said all these things referring to these different forms of calcium when they are in supplements are all containing carbon. That's not the definition of organic versus inorganic. Carbon dioxide in the air has a carbon molecule. That doesn't mean it was made through a living process. So bacteria in the soil takes inorganic minerals, adds a single carbon atom, and makes that mineral absorbable and usable by the plant. That's why when they produce a lot of supplements in labs, if it goes through a bacterial process in a petri dish or whatever, then it is a little bit more usable by the body. If it is then fed through a plant, it's even more absorbable and usable by the body because it's in a matrix of cofactors. We'll get to that in a future point that you brought up. But essentially, link number 3 below talks about inorganic compounds and their definition and the specifics around this that you fail to have a grasp on at the moment. And you did bring up a good point in regards to trying to get me to clarify some things around calcium. I was partially mistaken in that I was specifying, and in my mind, I guess I was thinking of coral calcium supplements, in that they've been shown to be a fraud and not absorbable in the slightest, because these are made from fossilized coral. So in producing the shell around it, the animals that produce coral make calcium carbonate. That's what the majority of the coral is made of. But if it's become fossilized, it's returned to an inorganic state. And trying to make a supplement of that is pretty awful. But we see some of that in health food stores. We see supplements made of limestone or chalk. These are not usable by the body because they're in their inorganic form. Yes, there's calcium carbonate by the same name that is organic if it's taken from eggshells or pearl. That's a popular supplement. It's quite expensive, as you can imagine. Ground up pearls. And I don't actually know what Soylent is getting their calcium carbonate from. I highly doubt it's pearl calcium carbonate. But even if it was organic calcium carbonate from a plant or animal or what have you, calcium carbonate is only 40% absorbable because the elemental calcium is 40%, and 60% of that is the carbonate. So when you take 1 gram, which is about the daily amount you're getting in the typical dose of Soylent, you're only getting 400 milligrams of calcium a day. That's far under the RDA for calcium. And if you're active and needing more minerals, another point we're going to get to later on in this response, that's nowhere near enough. Maybe if you're a teen around 80 pounds, that would be enough if you're not active. But yeah, you need a lot more. You need cofactors also to help make that completely absorbable. And if this is inorganic calcium that is being used in Soylent, you're giving food for the calcium-forming organisms that everyone has in their body to begin that slow building of the coral reefs on the miniature scale inside your body that will lead to heart disease, cancer, whatever you're genetically perhaps most predisposed to. So the next segment of what you had to say, at 18 minutes and 10 seconds, you say this is a myth. And this is in reference to me talking about the myth of the slogan from 100 plus years ago of better living through chemistry. I would like to see peer-reviewed papers or proof that supports this misinformed statement. So usually if you're asking for proof of something, you don't state that something is already wrong. That's not coming from a place of honest, unbiased inquiry. You've already made up your mind, so you're just taking a holier-than-thou stance and asking to provide something that you have absolute certainty I won't be able to provide you. Bioavailability of nutrients from whole foods, GMOs, organic foods, and synthesized chemicals are almost identical. I don't know why it says almost and you don't just state your belief that they're identical. In fact, in the scientific community, there are more studies on the behaviors of those engaged in the foolishness of purchasing expensive organic foods and whole foods, since their benefits have either been shown to being insignificant or significant, but only to a negligible degree, perhaps even arising from the same variations in body needs that you argued earlier. In fact, from psychological surveys, those who purchase organic food are more likely to be looking out for their well-being. This is bringing up correlation instead of causation. Yada yada yada, rather than the effect of the food itself. So, the idea that better living through chemistry, that was a slogan. This isn't something that I need to disprove. That's what the whole video is about. This is what my points are countering. This is just me summing up and pointing out that slogan from the past that set the stage for the 20th century. And yeah, I don't need to give you peer-reviewed studies to show why a slogan is wrong. As mentioned in the video, I will be making a video in the near future about whole food nutrients versus synthetic nutrients that go into the depth that's required with the medical research behind it. That's really elaborate. I'm not going to go into this in this video, so I'll just have to hope that you will have a look at that when I've made that in the coming month or two, for when I get around to making that. To give you just one thing to go off of, just simply look at the difference between synthetic vitamin E versus organic or food-derived vitamin E. So the chemical name for synthetic vitamin E is DL-alpha tocopherol. Food-derived vitamin E is D-alpha tocopherol. So there's this L in the synthetic version. So if you look up studies showing health problems with DL-alpha tocopherol, you find it's connected with prostate cancer, various other types of cancers, heart problems, and this is a thing that they then took and tried to claim that antioxidants cause problems, saying possibly antioxidants and antioxidant-rich foods could cause cancer. It's absolute insanity that they take an isolated synthetic nutrient and try and project that onto wonderful, healing whole foods. This just shows the insane mentality of the reductionistic mindset. But D-alpha tocopherol does not have these same connections. In fact, even the overdose amount for these two different vitamins, which can be called vitamin E in both cases, but one's synthetic, one's from food. The synthetic one, you can overdose at 2,100 international units a day, if you're taking very large amounts of it. That's many times the RDA, and in the case of whole food derived vitamin E, you're looking at 2,500 international units a day before you overdose. So yeah, I'm not saying anyone's coming close to getting that amount from Soylent or anything like that, but you do have to recognize that there's not an identical effect between a purely chemical created vitamin versus one that comes from food. There's minute differences, and they don't have a way of easily creating it. They can feed synthetic vitamin E to a bacteria, and it poops out the food version of vitamin E that is then more beneficial to us, but it can't be created in that way without the bacteria being present. At least to my knowledge, I'd be happy to find proof that that's not the case. In regards to your reference to organic foods not having any nutritional difference to non-organic foods, so I'm aware of the studies that come out like once every couple of years, a single study that the mainstream media pounces on and shouts from a megaphone. I wonder why the corporate government-backed media promotes these studies when the same institutions are pushing the non-organic foods. I recognize that isn't a point, but that is something that should elicit strong skepticism in the way these studies are talked about. Obviously, these studies don't even look at the content of what's on the foods that you're consuming. If the nutritional quality was truly the exact same between factory farmed organic versus factory farmed non-organic, I'd still go with the organic. You're paying a higher price, but you're not getting a massive dose of xenoestrogenic pesticides of varying types, a whole wide range of them if you eat a varied diet. And I know my viewers will know what happens when you get a whole boatload of xenoestrogens flowing into your diet and your body. You're likely to end up with the fertility potential of a panda. So yeah, those studies don't even touch that, and the fact that they're looking at conventional organic produce, which is still not grown in nutrient-rich soil. The idea behind organic is that it's going back to the basics of farming. If you're eating local foods that aren't shipped for weeks on end, that are grown in fertile soils, you're going to end up with something that's nutritionally higher than something grown in pure NPK dirt. You can't even call that soil, basically, at this point. The topsoil is being completely destroyed by these factory farms that are given massive government subsidies, and the fact that you even begin to suggest that you support GMOs is appalling. I'm not going to talk about the health effects of GMOs because that's elaborate and this isn't what this video is about, but if you're supporting something that can only exist under government tyranny from stolen property from people, both in giving massive corporate subsidies to the companies, as well as providing money to a court system that defends intellectual property, which is a bastardization of actual property. Intellectual property hampers innovation, prevents small businesses from competing with big corporations, which try and get as many patents as they can to protect their business so that they can sue the crap out of smaller companies. In the case of Monsanto, they can patent genetic material that they've created in a lab. Without that, they'd have no basis for creating their company. So then there's also the fact that the topsoil is being eroded and completely dispersed, and this is where those nutrients that are so hard to get in trace amounts are just absolutely being destroyed. You end up with very nutrient deficient soil, and as is shown historically, when a culture starts to lose the topsoil of their fertile land that they grow foods on, that's traditionally when they've started to tank as a world power. I guess that's one positive to Soylent, is you're going to be avoiding the myriad of pesticides, hundreds if not thousands that you'd encounter on a yearly basis if you're eating conventional non-organic foods. And yes, you're also probably thinking that there's been studies showing that organic foods still contain pesticides. I don't think that arguing that some really illegitimate government labeled organic companies that have pesticide residues on their foods is an argument against organic foods, because you can just go local, go to privately labeled organic foods that have more legitimacy, and by supporting them you're actually supporting organic private labeling, which is far cheaper for the farmer. That's a way to vote with your dollar and show your insubordination against a tyrannical government, such as what we see throughout the West. So link number 5 below is just a study to show the very damaging effects of pesticides of varying types. We also have very little research of what happens when pesticides combine in our bodies to create new forms of xenoestrogens and toxic compounds that cause cancer and these things. It's a very difficult thing to study in long-term trials, just to understand what's happening and to control for people getting certain pesticides or not, quantities. There's virtually no way of studying it. We only have animal models which show some toxicity, some not. But why would you even want to take the risk of putting yourself up as a experiment with pesticide-laden food or GMOs, etc.? Coming back to your comments, 1858 in the video, somewhere, this wasn't even something that was in the video, you put a tag and then you said somewhere below in the comments you attacked someone for getting angry and insulting you, but now you are using a common sense approach. I guess you're referring to something in the video. What? Question mark. This is it supposed to be a scientifically driven narrative, isn't it? No, common sense is something that we have to follow ways of living. Yes, you have science, you have common sense, you have what works for you, you have what we see in past cultures. These are all very legitimate ways of evaluating health information, all types of information, to determine what's going to work best for you. You can have all the science saying the health benefits of this food, but if you're having a reaction to it, use your common sense and don't eat it. If you're getting a rash from something that science says is healthy, use your common sense and don't consume it. If science says this thing is unhealthy, but when you eat it you feel great over the long term, use your common sense and keep consuming it. So I'm not saying it should be weighted heavier than science, but trying to say common sense has no place in determining what's healthy or not is silly. And in regards to me talking to someone in the comments who didn't give a reference to this, I'm not going hunting for some random comment that has your perception of me perhaps using a fallacious argument or maybe using an ad hominem. It was most likely in response to someone who was using that towards me in the first place. I have no holds barred. If someone starts throwing mud, I throw mud back at them in some cases. Depends on my mood. I don't use that as a tactic against facts, however. 1915, you claim cofactors in whole foods, the chemical supplements we take. For example, vitamins are cofactors, that's why we take them. Then you claim that whole foods have higher bioavailability, but this has already been shown to be the result of concentration, water-soluble vitamins. I'm not going to read all of this. Essentially, I am going to be talking about this in a future video. Can't go too far into this, however, you did slightly misconstrue what I was saying. Besides the 16 essential vitamins and 60 essential minerals, there are many cofactor nutrients not present in isolated supplements. So you think when I say cofactors, I'm referring to vitamins working in combination. And that's true, that's to some degree what we need. So that's an argument against taking calcium on its own if you think you have bone problems, because you need the vitamin D, the magnesium, etc. But there's a whole host of other things that are in food that contribute in varying ways to the maximal absorption of all these different things. We know they're not essential. Various antioxidants, various phytochemicals. You look at the chemical complexity of chocolate. It's the most, if not one of the most complex foods, chemically speaking, on the planet. Thousands, if not tens of thousands, of different chemical compounds. If you were to break it all down in a reductionistic fashion, and that is next to impossible to recreate in a lab. If you take raw chocolate in its whole form, consume it, it's going to have beneficial effects that have been studied and shown, and you can't recreate that with supplements. It's not just the vitamins and minerals doing their work. It's the phytochemicals. It's all those trace minerals which aren't called essential. And that was my point in making that, which you didn't quite understand there. So we've adapted over millions of years to consuming whole foods and getting a wide range of complex chemical nutrition. And all these things contribute in varying ways to making those essential items more absorbable and more usable by the body, but also in preventing disease, honing and changing our body. There's plant alkaloids which act almost in the way of, we might build muscle by tearing it down a little bit. A plant alkaloid can actually damage our body in a very subtle way, and the body rebuilds itself and is stronger. That's the way herbs generally work, is they're ever so slightly toxic, and that's why not talking about nutritive herbs or tonic herbs, but herbs that you want to take under the care of a herbalist, they give you a set dosage for a short period of time, and it actually causes a bit of a breakdown in a part of the body, and it rebuilds and is stronger afterwards. It's just like building muscle. We need to be working towards a more natural diet in terms of rewilding, getting closer to natural, non-hybridized foods. So organic foods is great. Heirloom foods are better. Wild food is actually where it's at. It's where there's the highest concentration of this very complex biochemistry that interacts with our body in a very ancient way, in terms of it's what we've been designed to do. If we start heading further down the path of processed, refined, bizarrely lab-created food, we're going to end up with greater amounts of health problems, and that's evident as per comparing ancient cultures versus modern ones. And I'm talking ancient cultures that were doing things properly, such as what is talked about in Weston A. Price's work. So next you said at 1927, okay, I'm not even going to argue this. But you are. The idea that a living thing has life force that is beneficial to health is a pseudoscience philosophical idea that should not be brought to the table when trying to educate people about nutrition. Nutrition should be based on what we know and what we can learn, not what you believe. Well, I haven't talked about anything that I believe. I talk about things that I've learned. I'm simply just going to refer you to a book called The Body Electric Electromagnetism Foundation, or you can simply start at the very basics in biology by some of the founders of biology that recognize that there's an electrical charge present in plant matter. You can go to various videos on YouTube where people recharge their iPhone from a watermelon in salt water, or you've seen probably even in school as a kid growing up, people that run a clock off of a potato or a tomato. That's because there's a bioelectrical charge. Everything living is electrical. That is fact. If you want to dispute that, bring that to the table. I'm not saying there's magical prana that causes whole foods, if you only eat them and never touch synthetic vitamins, will cause you to levitate and ascend to a higher dimension. I'm talking about an electrical charge that when you consume living foods that have this electrical charge, it's incorporated into your body because it's going through your digestive system and breaks down, and it is a part of the food itself. This is a holistic view of food and nutrition, as opposed to the reductionistic, oh, we can only see these chemicals in here with our instruments. But if you were to use another instrument that you can get in a lab, such as a voltmeter or other things that measure electrical conductivity, you can see that there's an electrical charge in that. We know the heart in humans has an electrical charge. The brain has electrical charge and runs on impulses. The whole entire nervous system operates through electricity. We aren't purely chemistry. At 21:15, I appreciate the psychosomatic claim. It shows understanding of placebo, but could also mean that it had an effect. Yeah, that's why I mentioned it. Your language and way of framing this is holier than thou and is disrespectful and has no place in making a response free of fallacies. I'm really not going to get hung up about it, but it's not pleasant to deal with. But it's given me some incentive to maybe post this as a video as opposed to in the comments, because I might get some slight glee in making an example of someone who has this arrogance that I think needs to be cut down to size. To go on, 2140, mineral usage at different speeds has not been shown in any peer-reviewed literature I know of. You didn't look for it clearly, but it's also something that would be found in a textbook rather than a study. If this is a biological process, I would consider this an empty claim. In fact, all these things about ultra-trace minerals being needed are true, but the fact of the matter is that the body recycles these minerals very efficiently within our cell. So then how does Soylent provide it? Over long periods of time, we eventually will lose these minerals, but often the plates and containers we eat food from will actually leach these minerals into our diet. Where the fuck did you get that bizarre idea from? Are you referring to like iron from like cast iron frying pans? That's not usable because it's inorganic iron and it's toxic to the body. Just like you don't eat rusty nails if you want to get iron into the body. maybe BVA from a tin can. That's not needed. The BVA actually blocks the tin from being absorbed, and even if it was absorbed, it would be inorganic tin because it's a metal. Our daily flux or loss of these trace minerals are probably on the 0.01% scale. Where the fuck do these numbers come from? And that 0.01% of almost nanograms of material, this claim of mine isn't supported by anything but intuition from a strong understanding of cellular metabolism. But yours is only based on a shallow understanding of how ultra-trace minerals are processed. Well, that's obviously a lot more than intuition, isn't it? Why the fuck didn't you edit this out before posting it? Yours is intuition, mine is from various authors. I don't have the time to find the equivalent research online, but link number 7 below is a book called Rare Earths Forbidding Cures by Dr. Joel Wallach, and it talks about all these various minerals, trace minerals that were in diets. One example of what was done traditionally was the consumption of wood ash, which was an excellent source of trace minerals that indigenous cultures would use. They'd take the ash from their fire and mix it into their food. Bannock, a traditional indigenous bread that was about 1/3 or 1/4 wood ash, was a great source of a lot of these things. You're not going to get this from Soylent. You're not going to get anywhere near enough, and we do have requirements that are more than 0.01% nanograms. Really, there's nothing to respond to here. You haven't made a point except admitted that you just made this up. 2230, I find it absolutely amusing. The whole food extracted compounds are better than synthesized compounds when they are exactly the same. You know, we've already talked about this and I countered it, so I'm not going to spend too much talking about this. And the whole food extraction of these compounds still require chemical treatments through bleaching and organic solvent filtration. You are being exposed to the same organic solvents as you would be exposed to taking synthetic compounds. Nothing I said in the video was about being exposed to synthetic compounds from extraction processes. Have you ever done an extraction from a plant or animal or whatever? I would recommend it. It would put all this whole food supplement rhetoric to rest. This whole paragraph isn't even addressing points of this point. I don't need to prove that I've done something in my spare time if I have the knowledge talking about something. We're talking about facts. We're not talking about personal experience of lab work. I have done extracts of all sorts of plants and animal compounds. I've used alcohol, naphtha. Yeah, it's pretty rudimentary. I'm not in the business or have the interest in making complex extracts. That's why I buy products. I don't make a whole heck of a lot of whole food extracts. I make herbal extracts from time to time. But even that being said, you know, these things are really left behind after an extraction process. There's probably some forms of extraction that are more optimal than others in terms of leaving absolutely nothing behind. I know naphtha is wonderful in leaving absolutely nothing behind. Naphtha is obviously, being a petroleum product, you wouldn't want to consume it, but when you've made an extract with it and you burn it all away on a very low boil, for instance, it's totally non-toxic, the product that's left behind. So I have nothing against various processes for creating things. I'm interested in whether those things that are created are healthy or not. So don't give me this rhetoric that you've put on me, which actually is an attempt at a straw man argument. You're trying to create an image of me that you're assuming about me, in that specifically that you'd think I would be against the extraction process because they're using chemicals. Well, I've never said anything about that in any of my videos, let alone the video you've just watched part of. And yeah, that's just not even valid in this type of a discussion. So this is more of a tangential logical fallacy type approach you're taking to trying to discuss these issues. And basically it's like, if I could use a metaphor, it's like someone driving a souped up Honda and putting flame decals onto their car. People with no knowledge of cars, no knowledge of what is a fast car or what's a good quality car, they might see the flame decals as it drives by and think, wow, that's an impressive looking car. They've added these superficial things to try and elevate its impression on people. And that's what you've done with your words, that's what you do with your debating tactics. Like I said, there are some relevant points, relevant in terms of them just being points, not that they're actually valid points. And that's what I'm countering, but yeah, you've got a lot of dross mixed in with the gold nuggets of something that could be likened to wisdom. Next thing you said at 24:48, are you suggesting that pharmacology as a field has injured humanity? That Plavix, Enbrel, Efavir drugs that treat heart disease, psoriasis, and AIDS are detrimental to humanity? Or perhaps you're referring to the large number of narcotics that are prescribed. Please be clear. Remember, you are talking to millions of people. I would like to be able to talk to millions of people over the course of my entire channel. It's history. I have reached several million people, but it's far from happening in just any one video at this point. But to go on, who can grossly be misinformed by crude statements such as this? You can even kill someone by convincing them that they should stop taking their antidepressants for manic depressive disorder. So fuck you, do not tell me how to run my channel, and do not make the statement that you think I'm telling people to stop taking drugs that are keeping them in the fine balance of being stable and living. There was a disclaimer at the beginning of my video. Nowhere in my video or any video will you find me telling people to get off drugs that are keeping them stable. Drugs have their place in crisis care. People who are on them need to obviously stay on them and work with a medical professional if they're looking to tailor them back and move towards lifestyle solutions to their issues. If you don't know the historic framework around the corporate takeover of the medical healthcare system starting more than 100 years ago, I'll read a brief excerpt from an article I've written. It's not published yet online anywhere, so I'm going to go over the few paragraphs here. Most people don't know this stuff, and they just like sneer down their nose at anything that's not allopathy. Nothing could be further from the truth. So, in the early 1900s, the industrialists Andrew Carnegie and John D. Rockefeller began donating hundreds of millions of dollars to gain a monopoly in the health market. They did this while also heavily investing in chemical companies that were developing pharmaceutical drugs. Unlike herbs, homeopathic remedies, etc., drugs could be patented under intellectual property laws and thus ensure a higher margin of profit. Don't take me reading this as me claiming that these things are effective. I'm not going to get into specifics of what I think about each of those things individually, i.e. the homeopathy. I'm just referring to the fact that they were around at that time and couldn't be patented. In 1910, the Flexner Report, funded by the Carnegie Foundation, transformed medical education. Flexner's biased report shed doubt on all forms of competition to modern medicine, including osteopathy, chiropractic medicine, naturopathy, and homeopathy. Natural, non-drug therapies were viewed as quackery and charlatanism. Oddly enough, quackery was a term originally created to describe doctors that continued the use of mercury-based therapies after that was considered an ineffective therapy. So they would do things like mercury foot baths and what have you. Oddly enough, doctors today still use all sorts of medicines that have mercury derivatives in them. They have their reasons for having that in there, but I just think it's a little ironic that people throw around the term quackery when its original meaning can actually be applied in some degree to allopathy today. Over the next 30 years, nearly all non-allopathic educational institutions were abandoned and closed in favor of ones that were only teaching the use of drugs, surgery, and vaccines. Prior to these moves to create an environment of hostility against the aforementioned disciplines, all of these schools of thought had a fairly equal share of the market, and this was thanks to the effects of the free market and the fact that each area had excelled at health solutions for specific circumstances. So, of course, when you get big money funding government to create regulations and block certain areas of an industry, that is crony capitalism. So the medical model we have today is completely a result of crony capitalism. The allopathic drugs as primary solutions system excels at crisis care. If you're in a car accident, you should hope that you have access to really good allopathic medical doctors and nurses. Allopathy focuses on the quickest way of reducing a symptom, but doesn't focus on getting to the root source of a problem. When it comes to health conditions as mild as acid reflux, as severe as cancer, or anything in between, non-allopathic disciplines of medicine that deal with the root causes of a condition or illness get better results. There's certainly a place for all sorts of medications that deal with severe illness if it's come about and you need that to prevent death, so that you can then work on getting off the drug to transition with lifestyle means to a situation of better health. And then there's of course going to be legitimate genetic disorders and things that require some medication in order to function most optimally in life. And those are wonderful. Those actually have a purpose. But when drugs are used as a crutch, which is by far the majority of the pharmaceuticals that exist out there, you have side effects, however minimal to however great, and it never deals with the root problem, which is only going to exacerbate and can then feed other problems because it's never being addressed. So to ask me to clarify this in regards to what I meant when I was referring roughly to the pharmaceutical industry, it's a feeble attempt of yours to try to convince yourself that your poor arguments actually mean something, because why would you bring it up if your points earlier that were actually about Soylent actually had much substance? So to me it looks like that, because obviously this isn't a video about pharmaceuticals, and I would not get into specifics around that when mentioning that into a video, because it's already a 25-minute video. I'm not trying to extend it as long as this video is becoming here. So next you said, I stopped at the 25-minute mark. I actually can't watch this anymore. Beyond attacking you for what I believe is committing an atrocity for trying to discredit years of scientific research. Oh, so you realize you are attacking me as opposed to my points. And pushing your own agenda of advertising for a product that probably has no significant benefit over normal supplements you could obtain yourself. This entire video uses fear tactics to draw people to a foolish ideology of health promotion. So no, there were no actual points in that. You know, it was just your 3 paragraphs of summing up, more adjectives and personal attack. That's where the majority of it was contained. To further read what you're saying, I came here because a friend of mine wanted to start Soylent and was scared by the statements you made. Did they comment on the video? How come I'm not talking with them? How come they didn't approach me and ask me for clarifications on any points? Now, is Soylent tailor-fitted for everyone? No, but it's a start. If we were to just tailor-fit our diets to ourselves, we could be wasting much of our time that can go towards enjoying life, trying to seek a way to live maybe a year or more. I am legitimately terrified of your kind. Oh wow. A group of people that spread misinformation about GMOs, whole food. I don't know if you mean whole foods as in eating natural foods in their whole state, or if you mean whole food supplements and organic supplements. And by the way, I was never talking about like certified organic supplements. Once again, this is organic based nutrients that aren't synthetic. And it is even more terrifying that you can convince normal people with this pseudo-scientific rhetoric. I'd actually suggest you look at what the term rhetoric means, because it's actually spewing language without a basis to it, which is what your entire post has been. Obviously there's a few valid points that were mostly just misunderstandings and a need for me to clarify on, but you know, this really at first looked impressive. I was, you know, going through the emotions of, oh my god, I'm gonna have to deal with this. It's big enough that I can't just ignore it. I have a commitment to answering questions on my channel, and I was bunkering down to respond to this, but then going through it, it was laughable, honestly laughable, mostly unsupported by any peer-reviewed journals. Actually, the onus for proving things is on the people offering a new paradigm. So a lot of things I was talking about in the video were very broad, general ideas and often physiological facts that you would find in a textbook. I don't need a medical study to say, oh, the heart has 4 chambers and pumps blood around the body. That's an understanding, and there's a consensus around that. If I'm making a claim, an extreme claim, it requires extreme evidence, and I did provide a little bit more evidence in my response to you here. But you have to understand that the claims of better living through chemistry, synthetic supplements being equal to the nutrients found in whole foods and extracts from those foods, if we're going to create a product that is condensed and able to be taken, the onus is on that mindset to provide the proof. That's the starting point that we're missing here, and that people already entrenched in this ideology, the reductionism and the sort of transhumanist type philosophy, They're the new ones in the game. They're the ones defying nature, what's been given to us from nature, what we've come out of in terms of nature. I'm not saying nature is always right in terms of what we've done in the past and what we've consumed in the past and all these things, but to offer an alternative, you have to prove that alternative is safe and better and provides these things that it's claiming to do. That's the problem with biotech in terms of GMOs and pesticide use and all these things. They need to prove they're safe. They often get introduced into society, into agriculture, long before they're sufficiently proven. So I haven't watched any other of your videos, but I feel it would contain the same misleading health rhetoric as this. Okay, you're a fucking idiot, you know? You're trying to attack me on other stuff you haven't even watched and just making assumptions. How arrogant do you have to be to do that? It's not even worth putting that in for your own time's sake. I would like to ask you to stop. I think you'll probably know my answer to that. But it would be too much to ask. But you just did. Perhaps you could just read actual science and support your claims with actual research, and quote, said research. Then maybe I would take you more seriously. But as you know, you are a poison to people around me. Here's where the adjectives really get brazen, and you're not trying to slip them under the surface with these sort of pseudo-intellectual, dishonest labels that you're throwing at me. My friends and family and society as a whole, and speak completely irresponsibly. I don't even understand the sentence. My friends and family and society as a whole, and speak completely irresponsibly on things that could actually hurt people. Please leave such judgments to physicians and healthcare professionals, which, by the way, you tried to discredit, who are trained to help people. So, as the quality of a sentence tends to break down, it's usually a sign that cortisol levels are rising up in you, and you wouldn't feel an emotional reaction like that if you actually had a valid stance to begin with. So, I hope you've watched this all the way through. If you want to post more, be my guest, but I'm not going to stand for one shred of any BS when it comes to these personal attacks and logical fallacies to the nth degree. I will, of course, have to plug my product, Beyond Tangy Tangerine, the alternative, far better, far more complete alternative to Soylent. Not complete in terms of macronutrients. It's not a way to get your calories and fiber and things like that, but it contains far more micronutrients. It greatly contributes to the ideally 90 nutrients you're getting in every day to meet all your basic nutritional needs, plus more, because it contains a lot of whole food based antioxidants and things like that. That's going to be link number 8 below if you want to watch my recent video completely going over all the main points that make this such a wonderful product. And yeah, I wish you the best of luck, all of you, in continuing to disseminate health information and digging and searching for unbiased, solidly founded information, questioning information, especially if it comes along with the corporate government lobbied hundreds of years of industry behind it, that we have to question the motives. Obviously, anything that's made to make money has to provide some level of a service, otherwise it wouldn't be able to make money if people didn't find some use to it. But as we know from economics, when cronyism gets in the way, it distorts the market heavily. So, let me know what you think about this video in the comments below. Like, favorite, and share the video if you feel so inclined. And with that, I'll talk to you next time. Take care and embrace life without limits.